He was the most anticipated emperor in Roman history. When Caligula came to power in 37 AD, Rome celebrated in the streets for days. Bonfires, sacrifices, crowds so thick that people were crushed to death in the celebrations. In the first 3 months of his reign, Romans sacrificed over 160,000 animals in his honor. 160,000. They weren't celebrating a new emperor, they were celebrating the end of a nightmare. His predecessor, Tiberius, had spent his final years as a paranoid recluse on the island of Capri, sending lists of names to Rome to be executed, running a reign of terror so complete that senators were afraid to speak, afraid to stay silent, afraid to exist. When Tiberius died, the people of Rome reportedly threw his body in the Tiber River. And now, Caligula, young, 24 years old, son of the beloved general Germanicus, the most popular soldier Rome had produced in a generation. The people had watched Caligula grow up. They had called him Little Boot, Caligula, as a child, because he wore miniature soldiers' boots in his father's military camps. He was theirs. He was everything Tiberius was not. He ruled well for exactly 7 months. Then something happened. Nobody knows exactly what. Caligula fell gravely ill in October of 37 AD. He nearly died. When he recovered, he was not the same person who had fallen ill. What Rome got back was something it had never seen before. To understand Caligula, you need to understand what Rome was. Rome in the 1st century AD was the largest, most complex political organism the ancient world had ever produced. At its center was the emperor, a position with no formal limits, no checks, no oversight that actually worked. The Senate existed. It met, it voted, it meant nothing. The emperor could override anything, order anything, execute anyone. For most emperors, this power was tempered by pragmatism. You needed the army. You needed the Senate's cooperation, at least publicly. You needed the people reasonably content. Power had invisible limits even when it had no formal ones. Caligula decided to test every single one of those limits. He started with money. Tiberius had been famously frugal, hoarding the state treasury. Caligula inherited an enormous surplus, by ancient accounts, enough to run the empire for years. He spent it in less than a year, on banquets that lasted days, on gifts to the people, on spectacles, gladiatorial games so elaborate they went on for weeks, on a floating bridge of boats across the Bay of Baiae, 2 miles long, which he built specifically so he could ride across it on horseback, wearing the breastplate of Alexander the Great to prove an astrologer wrong who had said he had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the sea. He rode across the sea. He proved the astrologer wrong. He spent a fortune doing it, and then he turned to the Senate. What Caligula did to the Roman Senate was less a political strategy than a sustained psychological experiment. He forced senators to run alongside his litter for miles in their togas. He made them wait outside his bedroom door for hours, then dismissed them without audience. He invited them to elaborate dinners and spent the evening whispering to his wife while laughing, letting them wonder if he was laughing about them. He was usually laughing about them. He forced men to watch as he executed their family members, then invited them to dinner the same evening and expected them to be cheerful. According to the historian Suetonius, when a father wept after watching his son executed, Caligula sent a litter to bring the man to dinner, urged him to eat, and spent the evening making jokes. He made a senator's wife come to his private chambers. He would return to the dinner table afterward and discuss the experience in clinical detail in front of the husband, commenting on her qualities and flaws as if reviewing livestock. He had men flogged for minor offenses, not with rods, as was standard, but personally with his own hands, in public, while senators watched. The message was not subtle. The message was, I can do anything to any of you, at any time, for any reason, and there is nothing you can do about it. He was right. For 4 years, he was right. The stories about Caligula that history remembers are the extreme ones, that he made his horse a consul, that he declared war on the sea and had his soldiers collect seashells as spoils of victory. that he built a temple to himself and had his own statue placed inside the temple of Jupiter. These stories are not all verified. Roman historians wrote about Caligula after his death, under emperors who had every political reason to make him look as monstrous as possible. Some of what was written was certainly exaggerated, but the core of it, the cruelty, the humiliation of the Senate, the paranoia, the complete dismantling of the social contract between emperor and governed, that is consistent across every ancient source. And some of the stories are almost certainly true. The horse, Incitatus, was real. Caligula stabled him in a marble stable with an ivory manger. He gave the horse servants and furniture. He invited the horse to dinner and had wine poured for him in a golden goblet. Whether he actually made the horse a consul is disputed, but ancient sources agree he threatened to do so, and the threat itself was the point. Not to honor the horse, to humiliate the Senate, to make clear that in his view a horse was as qualified to govern Rome as the men who sat in the Senate chamber. The war on the sea happened. In 40 AD, Caligula marched his army to the coast of the English Channel, arranged them in battle formation facing the water, gave the order to attack, and had them collect seashells. He called them the spoils of the conquered ocean. He sent them back to Rome as evidence of his military victory. His generals obeyed. That is perhaps the most disturbing detail of all. Not what Caligula ordered, but that it was done. By 40 AD, 4 years into his reign, the mood in Rome had shifted completely. The man the city had celebrated with 160,000 sacrifices was now something else entirely. The treasury was empty. The executions had become random, or appeared random, which was worse. Nobody knew who was safe. Nobody knew what the rules were anymore because there were no rules. Caligula had begun to present himself as a living god, not a man favored by the gods, a god himself. He wore the attributes of different deities at different times: Neptune's trident, the winged sandals of Mercury. He reportedly sat between the statues of Castor and Pollux in their temple and invited people to worship him. He sent a letter to the Jewish population of Alexandria ordering them to place his statue in their synagogues. The resulting crisis nearly caused a war, and through all of this, the cruelty, the spectacle, the chaos, the army watched. The Praetorian Guard watched. The men whose actual function was to protect the emperor began asking a question that had only one possible answer. How long can this continue? January 24th, 41 AD. Caligula was attending a theatrical performance in a tunnel connecting the palace to the theater. A group of Praetorian officers, led by a man named Cassius Chaerea, whom Caligula had repeatedly humiliated in public, mocking his voice, forcing him to use degrading passwords, blocked his path. What happened next took seconds. Chaerea struck first, a blow to the neck, then the others joined. Ancient sources say he was struck 30 times. He fell to the ground. He was 28 years old. According to some accounts, Caligula did not die immediately. He lay on the floor of the tunnel, wounded, and tried to crawl away. The guards finished the work. The man who had made Rome's most powerful men beg, weep, and humiliate themselves on command died crawling on the floor of a tunnel, begging guards who had decided he was no longer worth protecting. His wife Caesonia was killed the same day. His infant daughter was killed by having her head smashed against a wall. The Senate met immediately and debated abolishing the emperorship entirely and returning to the Republic. They decided against it. Within days, the army had selected a new emperor, Claudius, Caligula's uncle, a man everyone had considered harmless. Nobody had seen him coming. That was the point. Caligula ruled for 3 years, 10 months, and 8 days. In that time, he managed to empty the treasury, terrorize the Senate, destabilize Rome's relationships with its provinces, and demonstrate something that Rome had always tried to pretend wasn't true. The emperor had no limits. The system that was supposed to govern the most powerful empire on Earth had no actual mechanism for stopping a man who simply decided not to follow the rules. The Senate couldn't stop him. The law couldn't stop him. Public opinion couldn't stop him. In the end, the only thing that stopped Caligula was a group of guards in a tunnel who decided they'd had enough. He was 28 years old when he died. He had inherited the most powerful position in the ancient world. He had spent nearly 4 years proving that power, without restraint, without consequence, without any external check, doesn't elevate a person, it reveals them. And what it revealed in Caligula, what it reveals in anyone given that kind of absolute authority, is the oldest lesson in politics. The problem was never the system, the problem was always the man inside it.